Okay, let's continue our discussion of the Protestant Reformation with its spread. Now, Lutheranism and Calvinism are not the only new religions to form as a result of Martin Luther. The Anabaptists, formed in Zurich, Switzerland, in 1525, were one example. These are perhaps the most liberal-thinking Christians, and they, for this reason, will be highly unpopular, and they're going to get killed in droves by Catholics and Protestants alike. So they believed in a voluntary association of believers with no allegiance to any states. They did not believe in childhood baptism. They said, let's wait until people can truly understand their baptismal vows, and that's why they were so unpopular, because people were like, well, that's horrible, because if you have like a 5-year-old who dies, then they're going to go to hell, because that's what they believed. But the Anabaptists believed that God wouldn't send a child to hell even if they hadn't been baptized. So that was why they were unpopular. Okay, so you should know that. So they also believed that the end of the world was coming, and they rejected the entire idea of the Trinity. So like I said, they are the left wing, if you will, the liberals of the Reformation. They were led by John of Leyden. They were all about polygamy. Women also were leaders. In fact, women were treated largely as equals among the Anabaptists. They only maintained the Bible in this 1532 takeover of Münster, and they actually killed some Lutherans and Catholics, so that also probably made them very unpopular. So finally, combined armies of Catholics and Protestants combined to capture and execute the Anabaptist leaders. All right. Now, the bodies of these executed Anabaptist leaders were publicly displayed in iron cages hanging from this church for many years. Kind of gruesome. So yeah, we didn't really like the Anabaptists if we were any other Protestant or Catholic. Now, the long-term impact of them, though, it doesn't stop there. They will go on to inspire the development of the Mennonites, okay, who are all about pacifism, and there are still Mennonites, living actually in Wisconsin today. Quakers are fewer in number now, but there's still a Quaker population here in the United States. They're very peaceful. They have their own peace monument, actually, that they donated to Vietnam after the Vietnam War. There's like a Quaker Peace Park in, I can't remember the city now. Okay, but in Vietnam. Okay, so probably in Ho Chi Minh City. There are also the Unitarians, who also reject the Trinity, and they are descendants of the Anabaptists, and they sort of just accept it. They're almost like non-denominational Christians. They'll just sort of accept everybody, but they do reject the concept of the Trinity. And then Luther did not believe in the legitimacy of any other faith except for mainstream Protestantism, so Luther would not have accepted any of these groups. Zwingli will be the father and founder of the next most prominent form of Protestantism. So Lutheranism obviously is a big one. So right now we have Catholics and we have Lutherans. We also have Zwingli. He's going to start the Reformed Church, which will later be later John Calvin's sort of going to take over this, because Zwingli's going to die pretty soon, and it's going to be known as Calvinism, okay, because of John Calvin. So basically, Zwingli is a humanist. He loves the idea of Lutheranism, but he sort of, and he actually establishes his own theocracy, which is like a religious government in Zurich. But he saw the Eucharist different from Luther. He saw the Eucharist as only symbolic. He didn't think that, the wine actually turned into blood and stuff like that. So he officially split with Lutheranism in 1529, and Luther's Augsburg Confession excluded, Zwingli's beliefs. So that's why it's only... Oops, I went too fast. That's why it's only part of the Lutheran Church today, the Augsburg Confession, okay, in 1530. Okay, so Calvinism, the most significant of the new Protestant sects. Okay, so John Calvin takes over Zwingli's Reformed Church after Zwingli is killed in these religious wars, which will be resolved by the Peace of Augsburg in 1555. And John Calvin was French, and of course the French are fervently Catholic. They're very, very Catholic. And he was driven out of France because of his beliefs, because he didn't want to die. Just like Luther, he's strongly influenced by the writings of Erasmus, and as I said, he was exiled to Switzerland. So Switzerland is a popular place for Protestants. In 1536, he published what's called the Institutes of the Christian Religion, which we read in class on Friday. It's his foundational work, and it discusses predestination. So the idea is that since God is all-knowing, before the dawn of time, he already picked out who was going to be born, who is going to live, who's going to die, and most importantly, who is going to be saved and who is going to hell. So it doesn't matter, God already has decided for you. So even if you think you're a good person and you've done good things, you might be condemned to hell, because really only God can decide that. So good works are not good enough, just like Luther said, for salvation. He also, like Luther, says there is no free will. But good works are a sign that one has been chosen. This is going to be extremely, extremely important. And this is what I was talking about, how John Calvin is like really responsible for your entire American mentality, because we believe here in America, like if you work hard, you know, it's like the American dream, right? If you work hard, you will be rewarded. So Calvin basically said religiously, yeah, if you work hard and your business is really successful and your family's happy and stuff, that's probably a sign that you're one of the elect. Okay, write this down in your notes. Elect, E-L-E-C-T. Elect means that you are chosen. That's his terminology. The elect are church members, like I just said. They've had their conversion experience. Okay, they're visible saints. Okay, the elect are like super Christians, and of course they're going to heaven because God has predestined for them to go to heaven. So Calvin established his theocracy in Geneva by 1540. A theocracy, again, is a government based on religion. Geneva became the new center of the Reformation in Europe. So after Germany had its day, right, Geneva in Switzerland is going to be our next center of Protestantism. So like Zwingli, Calvin believed the church and city should combine to enforce Christian behavior. So this is an example of his political thought. He believed that there should be Christian government, basically. Only those committed to following Calvinism were allowed to live in the city. So if you are not a Calvinist, you're out. Calvinists were the most militant and uncompromising of all Protestants, okay? So there's the consistory. Did I say that right? No, of course not. The consistory, okay, is a judiciary. So like a judicial body, like a bunch of judges, made up by lay elders, so people outside of the church, lay elders, and they had the power to impose harsh penalties for those who disobeyed God's law. Oh, poor Michael. Okay, Michael Servetus was a Unitarian humanist from Spain, and he was burned at the stake in 1553 because he publicly denied the Trinity. And this happened, I keep going back and forth, I knew this happened, of course, in Geneva. Okay, the Protestant work ethic is responsible for the success of the United States of America. Why is the U.S. a world power right now? It has everything to do with the Protestant work ethic. Calvinists later stressed the importance of hard work and accompanying financial success as a sign that God was pleased. So, you want your neighbors to think that you are saved. You don't want to be that guy in town. They're like, oh, that guy, he's for sure going to hell. Like, nobody wants to be that guy, right? So it was really important that you worked hard and did well financially, so it looks like you were going to heaven. So the spread of Calvinism, greater impact on future generations than Lutheranism. Like I said, it's responsible basically for the success of the United States. It will also develop into Presbyterianism in Scotland. Presbyterians are Scottish Calvinists. John Knox established the Presbyterian Church in 1560. This is him here. He looks very puritanical, very serious. Okay, I have a friend from Scotland, and he did not know who John Knox was, and it made me very sad. Okay, John Knox established the Presbyterian Church, 1560. Okay, this will also spread to France. Huguenots, please own this word. Huguenots are French Protestants. They are violently suppressed by the Catholic French authorities. In the Netherlands, the Protestants are called the Dutch Reformed Church, and they challenged Catholicism. This is going to be a really big deal in our next series of religious wars, the Dutch Reformed Church. So again, Calvinist. England, Puritans were eventually persecuted by the Anglican Church. Okay, the Anglican Church, we'll talk about in a minute, is its own Protestant church. Oh my goodness. So far we've talked about Lutherans, Calvinists, then the forms of Calvinists are Presbyterians, Huguenots, Dutch Reformed Church. Puritans are people who want to purify the Anglican Church, and the Anglican Church is its own Protestant religion because Henry VIII will break with the Catholic Church, which we'll talk about soon. Okay, so now countries to where Calvinism did not spread are Ireland, Spain, Italy, and all three of these places are very heavily Catholic, as well as Eastern Europe. Okay, Poland, Hungary, that's pretty solid Catholicism there. Okay, now what is going on in England? What is this Anglican Church all about? There were early English reformers. You remember John Wycliffe. You remember possibly from your reading William Tyndale, and he was the humanist who translated the Bible into English. Sadly, he was hunted down and executed in 1536 after thousands of English Bibles made their way to England, and he refused to recognize Henry VIII's leadership of the Anglican Church. Well, what's all this about Henry VIII leading the Anglican Church? He had earlier been a conservative Catholic who criticized Luther. He published works, in fact, that attacked Luther's views. And in fact, the Pope gave him the title Defender of the Faith. What happened then? Well, Henry was not happy with his marriage to Catharine of Aragon, a Spanish princess, really, okay? Now, Catharine of Aragon is Charles V's cousin. You remember Charles V is like the big defender of the faith, I guess. He's the guy who's out having wars with all, the Holy Roman Empire in Central Europe. Now, his cousin Catharine of Aragon is married to Henry VIII for like, it's like 18 or 20 years or something, and she couldn't produce a male heir. Historians have likely contributed this to the fact that Henry VIII probably had syphilis, but of course they didn't know about that back then. So Mary only had one surviving daughter, Mary, and she miscarried 4 other times. So because he needed a male heir, he believed that God was punishing him for marrying his brother's widow. Oh yeah, by the way, she was married to Henry's brother. Gross. Okay, but he died young, and so she married Henry VIII. And she was actually very much in love with Henry VIII. But he didn't so much reciprocate those feelings. He had a crush on this fine-looking lady, Anne Boleyn. You might have heard of Anne Boleyn. She was his mistress. So Henry says to the Pope, please annul my marriage with Catherine, because of course I can't divorce her, because that's illegal. You can't do that in the Catholic Church at this time. So, and of course it's still heavily frowned upon now. So, okay, he says, Pope, annul my marriage. Well, Charles V steps in and says, no, you can't do that. That's my cousin, and if you do that, then she'll be a whore. She'll be like this damaged woman, because it will have been as though she were never married, and look, she has a child with you. You can't do that. And the Pope is very thankful to Charles V for defending Catholicism all across Central Europe. So he's like, sorry, Henry, no divorce for you. Well, Thomas Cranmer decided, the new Archbishop of Canterbury, decided to convince Henry. He's like, you know what, dude, this is never going to go your way. Everyone else is starting their own religion. Why don't you? And he's like, dude, that's a great idea. I'm going to start my own religion, and we're going to call it the Church of England, which is essentially the exact same thing as Catholicism, except instead of the Pope being in charge, who's in charge? The king or queen. So in the 1534, Henry VIII passed the Act of Supremacy, which made him officially the head of the Church of England. Catholic lands were confiscated, monasteries were closed down, so land and money go to, of course, the king. He's like, dude, I should have done this like years ago. This is awesome. Dude, I got all this land and this money, and I can divorce and marry whoever I want to, which he will take full advantage of. So in 1534, he passed the Act of Succession shortly after the Act of Supremacy, which is where all the king's subjects had to take an oath of loyalty to the king as head of the Anglican Church. Oath of loyalty to me, the king. Okay, so Henry ordered the execution of Thomas More. Remember Thomas More? I really like him. It's very sad that he gets executed, because Thomas More is a humanist, but he's a very devout Catholic, and he just can't. It's sad because he actually was very good friends with Henry VIII, but Henry's like, dude, sorry, you have to swear an oath. You won't do it. Gotta go. Off with his head. In 1536, there was a huge opposition in the north, especially in very Catholic Ireland. And very Catholic Ireland says, no, 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 no. You guys have conquered us, and it was fine. At least you were Catholic before, but now you're not even Catholic anymore. So it sparked this huge rebellion called the Pilgrimage of Grace, which the English will ultimately prevail. They'll win. Now, in total, Henry had 6 wives during his reign, and they were either divorced, beheaded, or died, okay? It goes divorced, beheaded, or died, divorced, beheaded, survived. We'll watch a fun little video in class. There's Anne Boleyn, and, he heard she was cheating on him, plus he didn't get a male heir. She produced Elizabeth, who will be probably the greatest ruler in all of English history. So he kills her. His third wife, Jane Seymour, had a son, finally. He was very weak and sick, and he didn't live very long. He did succeed Henry, though, eventually in 1547, but she died. Okay, and then there's 3 more wives. They're pretty irrelevant. So he did pass then in 1539 the Statute of 6 Articles. Okay, so basically blah blah blah. We're still Catholic, but we have a new name for a church. Here's Edward VI. He was 10 when he became king. He adopted Calvinism, diverging slightly from his father, although he was still technically the head of the Catholic Church. And all you need to know about him is that he basically died. Okay. Now, well, maybe I should go back a little bit. Let's see. Why is this important? Okay, well, here, let's just review Calvinism real quick here. I need to get better at this. Okay, so again, salvation by faith alone. They denied the blood into, or I'm sorry, the wine into blood, bread into body thing, which is called transubstantiation. They narrowed it down just to the 2 sacraments. Of course, marriage can't be a sacrament if you're allowed to get divorced, right? Baptism and communion, and he died. Okay, and people were upset that he died, because now we're like, well, wait, are we Protestant? Are we Catholic? What are we doing? Then his sister, Mary, doesn't she just look pissed? Like, this is supposed to make her look good. She's just, like, constantly angry. Mary Tudor is Bloody Mary. Now, Mary Tudor had originally married Philip II of Spain. Okay. Philip II of Spain is, of course, very Catholic, and she's like, yeah, Dad, brother, you're terrible people. We're Catholic now, and I'm just going to, like, massively slaughter people who are Protestants wherever I find them. So there were what's called the Marian exiles. Protestants fled England fearing Mary's persecution. 300 people were executed, including bishops and Colonel Cranmer, the guy who originally said, "Psst, hey, Henry, why don't you start your own church?" Okay, so yes, Bloody Mary died, perhaps sadly, perhaps not so sadly, of stomach cancer. Elizabeth I, then, the Virgin Queen, we'll talk about that in its ironic title. Elizabeth I, like I said, is perhaps the greatest ruler of all of English history. She's the daughter of Henry and his lover Anne, but she was legitimately the queen at the time. But the Catholics saw her as illegitimate. She held strongly Protestant views, but she's like, look, guys, okay, so this is like her really face, like, really, are we gonna be killing each other and messing up our political stability over religion? Really, please? Okay, so she did solidify England as a Protestant nation. She says, now and forever we are Anglican. But she's a politique. Please know this word. A politique is a practical politician. She's a pragmatist. She will do things that are pragmatic. What makes the most sense here? What is most reasonable? And what she decides to do is, instead of persecuting Catholics, she's like, yeah, if you're caught going to Catholic church, $10 parking ticket, no big deal, okay? Can everybody just focus on making England a nice place to live? And that's exactly what happened. In the Elizabethan Settlement, Elizabethan Parliament required conformity to the Church of England, but you could pretty much do whatever you wanted in your own home and nobody would care or bother you. The Anglican Church was very much like Lutheranism. There were some church practices that resembled Catholic practices, which is where the Puritans come in, because Puritans are people who want to purify or get rid of all Catholic affiliations with the Church of England. She instituted the Book of Common Prayer to sort of give more legitimacy to the religion in 1553, and Catholicism remained especially among the gentry but could not be practiced openly. Like I said, just do it in your own home. It's kind of like don't ask, don't tell, okay? All right. You guys can read this on your own. The 39 articles are just further establish what it means to be Anglican. Now, there was a plot to kill her where Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, her cousin, was going to, they were going to execute her and she was going to take her place because these particular people were Catholic and they didn't like her. And so Elizabeth reluctantly executed Mary, Queen of Scots, which was probably a setup. It's very sketchy. I don't think Elizabeth was really happy about it, and of course Mary wasn't either, but what could she do? It was a challenge to her rule. It was a Machiavellian decision, right? Yep, and there she is being executed. Poor Mary. Let's have a moment for Mary. Okay. All right. So, how did the Reformation impact women? Oh, by the way, we're going to talk more about Elizabeth in class, so if you're disappointed, don't worry. We're going to do an entire DBQ on her. Anyway, Protestant women. Luther, did not do much for women's rights. Get back in the kitchen, go be barefoot and pregnant. Okay. Calvin believed in the subjugation of women also. Get back in the kitchen, go be barefoot and pregnant. Okay. Protestant churches had greater official control over marriage than did the Catholic Church. They suppressed common law marriages, which used to be common in Catholic countries. So basically, women's rights continue to plummet as a result of the Protestant Reformation. Let's go back. So poor Catharina von Bora, she was the nun who gave up being a nun to marry Martin Luther. Luther and his wife shared this view. Luther believed that sex was an act to be enjoyed by a husband. Oh, not poor her, I guess, in that sense, but at least they got to have sex. Good for them. But yeah, she was still barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, wasn't allowed to do anything really. Okay, so let's see. One good thing, okay, because people who are Protestant want you to read the Bible for them, people want people to read the Bible for themselves, women were also encouraged to read the Bible, which did result in an increase of literacy for women. Mothers were expected to teach their children to read so they could read the Bible and be Protestant. Schools for girls were developed so they could read the Bible and be Protestant. Okay, not so that they could study humanism and all this kind of stuff, just so they could read the Bible and be Protestant. This guy, Philip, is important in establishing a school for girls. You might see him maybe one more time in class, probably not that important. Okay, Protestant women, go back, lost opportunities in church service. For example, they could never be nuns and become educated because there were no nuns if you weren't Catholic. And women gradually lost rights to manage their own property. Oh yeah, that's why it kind of sucked to be Catharina von Bora. Okay, Catholic women continued to enjoy opportunities in the church through religious orders and become educated. And in fact, Angela Merici, she's really cool. She founded the Ursuline Order of the Nuns in the 1530s. We're going to talk more about her in the Catholic Reformation, but it's fine. To provide education and religious training, and they tried to combat heresy through education. She's like, well, if we could just educate people to be Catholics, then we wouldn't have so many heretics. So she spread her views to France and throughout the New World. Teresa de Avila was a major Spanish leader for the reform movement for monasteries and converts, and preached that individuals should have a relationship with God through prayer and contemplation. So women actually did very well in the Catholic Church. This is the last slide. The memory device for the Catholic Reformation is St. Paul. So why did we get into the Catholic Reformation already? I don't know. But before we do, we'll end it here, and then we'll pick up with this on our next lecture. So there's the Society of Jesus, which we'll talk about abuses, Reformed and church practices. There will be the index of prohibited books. You guys can read this on your own. Let me just quickly go back and summarize for you. The Protestant Reformation spread because A, political leaders wanted land and money and power from the Catholic Church. B, for, like the Church of England was established strictly because Henry VIII wanted a divorce. But it ended up providing a great deal of national unity to England under the wise management of Elizabeth the Great. And furthermore, it spread through the printing press, through literature and people educating and advocating either for Protestantism or Catholicism. So we're going to stop there, and we'll pick up here at our next lecture. Thank you.